Let me start with the military side, the so-called porcupine strategy. Russia is a permanent threat for the whole of Europe, so Ukraine must be strong enough to deter any future attack with deterrence through denial. Europe has already supported Ukraine with 50 billion euros in military aid, but now we must move from a logic of aid to a logic of integration of our defence industries. And this is the central element in our white paper Readiness 2030. We're encouraging our member states to place orders directly in Ukraine's defence industry, because this is the most effective and the most cost-efficient way to support Ukraine's military efforts.
Is there any possibility that the Ukraine army can survive 5 more years of what they're facing from the Russians?
No, and she doesn't give any specifics. What we need to know are what are the numbers. I want to know from her, what are the balance of forces on the Ukraine-Russia front at this point in time? How many troops do you have on each side? What do the armaments look like on both sides? And then moving forward, what do you think the troop levels will look like? It's quite clear that the Russians are recruiting somewhere between 30 and 40,000 people every month. How many people are the Ukrainians recruiting? And what effect will the ratio of Russian recruits per month to Ukrainian recruits per month mean for the gap that now exists between Russia and Ukraine on the battlefield? What about weaponry? We know the Russians are producing huge amounts of weaponry. Are the Ukrainians and the Europeans together, and maybe the Americans, going to be able to keep up with the Russians? None of these questions are dealt with. She's basically arguing that Ukraine can stay in the fight, and not only stay in the fight, but can rectify the situation on the battlefield, right, roll back Russian gains, and that Ukraine can get its territory back. That's what she's in favor of doing. And she provides no evidence of how that can be done. She makes all these airy-fairy comments about doing X and doing Y and doing Z, but it just doesn't tell you anything. I want to know what the numbers look like. This is a war of attrition. And we know that the Russians have a significant advantage. We know that the Ukrainians are having trouble covering the entire front. They're leaving gaps on the front line because they don't have enough forces to fill all of the front line. The force to space ratio, so to speak, is working against them at this point. How does she plan to rectify that? There's just no answers. And what about air defenses? It's quite clear that the Ukrainians are desperate for better air defenses, and that the Russians are pretty much free to bomb away inside of Ukraine. Is this going to change anytime soon? Does she have any plans for how Ukraine is going to get more air defenses, how it's going to get a better air-to-air capability? Is she going to make the argument that Ukrainian drones are better than Russian drones, which are improving by the day? Maybe there is an argument to be had there, but she doesn't lay it out. It's just empty rhetoric. It sounds like these people are in the Führer bunker. April 19th.
Speaking of World War II, right, there's some other analogies that are less attractive from our side. And yeah, that's certainly the case here. And when you look on the front line, in just the last week or so, the pace of acceleration of the Russians has been accelerating somewhat and staying very consistent. Otherwise, there have been days where Russia has taken 20 and 29 square kilometers in a single day, all across the front, added up. So these things are coming in chunks now. There was some more. I looked earlier this morning. There have been some new losses on the eastern front of the Kupiansk area down in the Zaporizhia. There is evidence that Russia is on the other side of the Dnieper River and could open a new front down there, which would be really, really bad for the Ukraine because they don't have many defenses on the other side of that river because they have piecemealed it out, the troops that they had there, thinking that the river was going to protect them. So they have sent those troops elsewhere to defend against other holes in the gaps. And if the Russians do penetrate there on the Dnieper River and cross into that area, the Zaporizhia area, there's almost nothing that can stop. We'll see how that develops. But all of these developments that are happening are definitely on the bad side for the Ukraine.
Danny, if I can just make one other point, it's very important to emphasize that it is Ukrainians who are doing the dying here. And it's not Europeans. It's not Germans. It's not Americans. And it's very easy to talk in cavalier ways about continuing the war. when it's not your people who are dying on the battlefield. And I think one of the real problems that we face in the West is that the West has gotten away for a long time with either relying on the all-volunteer military, in the United States' case, or relying on others like the Ukrainians to do the dying. The elites basically don't die. They don't put their lives at risk. And I think this has a tendency to make us rather cavalier when it comes to this whole issue of using military force and then continuing losing wars. We'd still be in Afghanistan if Trump hadn't made the decision to get out. It's just quite remarkable how willing we are to engage in these wars and then keep them going. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Americans don't die, and in this case, Europeans don't die either. If Germans were dying on the battlefield, this war would have been brought to an end a long time ago.
Yeah.